As often occurs in our life, Jesus' peak experience of God's love at his baptism by John is followed immediately by a desert experience. Spiritual people in general talk about their prayer and meditation dry times when we can only pray with the greatest exertion of will. The dry times that we have in our life allows us to have new lessons of living and to have new sources of courage uncovered in our life. And it is comforting to know that even God's own Son was not exempt from such a painful experience. All of us, without exception, undergo trials like this. But what lessons did Jesus learn from his temptation? Jesus' temptation has to do with the ministry he is about to begin. After the powerful experience of his baptism, he may have thought that carrying his message to others was going to be easy. He soon learned otherwise. The purpose of the temptations is almost the same purpose as the Ignatian spiritual exercises, to help Jesus and to help us to choose the way to serve God that God wills, even though that way turns out to be terribly difficult. These temptations may seem to be remote from the temptations that ordinary people undergo. After all, Jesus had received the Spirit and his unique call to be God's anointed, the Messiah. But yet his temptation was very much like the temptation of the devil to Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. There they were challenged to make their lives one that they would be like God's, misusing their power by trying to solve their problems with their own will instead of listening to the will of God. Well, Jesus succeeds where his ancestors failed. He chooses the way of humility, of trust in God, rather than any fancy, flashy shortcuts to fame and power. The devil dangles before him one that he will make things a lot easier. It will be painless. But yet Jesus, in the midst of being hungry and tired after a long fast and lonely because he has not yet made any disciples, is one who is going to choose God to serve him in many ways. He acknowledges that pain is the touchstone of all spiritual progress. God's way for Jesus is going to hurt, and Jesus knows it. Luke ends his account of the temptations with the remark that the devil will try again at another moment. On the night before the crucifixion, when Jesus wrestles in the Garden of Gethsemane with the frightening will of Abba for him. In our prayer this week, let's continue to seek God's will for us and ask to follow Jesus more closely in his following of God's will. And perhaps the prayer of St. Richard, made famous in the Godspell musical, Lord Jesus, help me to see thee more clearly, love thee more dearly, and follow thee more nearly day by day.